for inviting me here. This is the first time I've done this, so we'll see how it goes. In the movie that you're about to see tonight, Sleep Dealer, drones play a rather significant role. Now, they don't have a very good reputation, I realize that, but they do have some good qualities, and what I'm going to try to do is to explain the technology of drones, what is a drone, where they come from, and where are they going. And you'll notice in the title that I have here, let's see if that sort of works. It's Target Sensor Weapon Flying Robot. And that's really what happened to drones. They started out as a target, I'll explain that. Then they evolved into a reconnaissance, or a drone carrying a sensor like a camera. Then they turned into a weapon with the Predator that a lot of you have read about, I think, in the newspaper. And today, the flying robots are about to come upon us, the Amazon package. And you'll see, if I have time, I'll show you a little video of a pizza delivery system. So they've got a very wide range of things they can do, and I'll try to tell you what they do. So I'm going to cover the history of drones. Actually, it's quite interesting. About 2 weeks ago, the Federal Aviation Administration had a mandate from Congress that they had to come up with regulations about how drones could interact with the national airspace, and they're about a year, maybe 2 years late. They just were really confused about how you can let them. And they took a small step. The small step is for baby drones, 55 pounds and under. And I'll show you what they've come out with. And this is not the law yet. It's proposed, and a lot of people will be commenting on it. And Amazon is not happy with what they had to say, but a lot of other people are reasonable. So I'll show you what they had to say. I'll summarize what the current regulations are proposed to be. And obviously with drones, you've got to talk about ethical issues, especially when you're talking about military drones. And I'll try to bring up those. I don't have any answers. I'm not an ethical expert. I'm an engineer. But I'll introduce the ethics to you, and I think it's something that you need to think about in this movie. There's some very strong ethical questions in this movie that you need to think about. I'll try to cover briefly some of the issues in future drone technology and draw a summary. So the definition of a drone, if you look it up in Webster, is that it's a remotely piloted, which means unmanned, air vehicle. And of course, like anybody else, I went to Google to see what the first hit would be. And apparently the Austrians, back in 1849, loaded up a balloon full of dynamite and floated it toward the city of Venice. And it worked out. It broke down part of the gate, but then the winds hit it and it came back and apparently caused more damage for the Austrians than it did for the Venetians. So the first introduction was not a huge success. Now, my assistant, my wife here, I asked her to find what the word comes from. Why drone? What's this thing about a drone? And the best she could find, and so this is not an expert here talking, but the best she could find is that male honeybees are called drones, and they're in the hive to fertilize the eggs, but they don't have a stinger. So when the first drones were used, you'll see they were target vehicles to help train people, gunnery people, and they had no weapons. So drones have no stinger, and drone aircraft have no weapons. So what they do now, I'll talk about how that happened. There were some technical things that made it possible to have drones. The first one was actually Nikola Tesla, who was a very famous scientist, but he also was a great entertainer. And he was the first one that took Marconi's radio technology and turned it into a remotely controlled radio frequency. And he had a demonstration at Madison Square Garden in 1898, where he demonstrated a remotely controlled boat. He had a little toy boat in a pool, and he could sit there and control the rudder on the boat, and the thing went around and did what he wanted to do. And so he made it possible. Without that, you couldn't have a remotely piloted vehicle. You can't put a tether on an aircraft that's taken off, so you've got to have remotely piloted. And so Tesla's technology was essential to have drones operate. Now, in World War I, there weren't, aircraft didn't really play a terribly significant role. Both sides were trying to come up with aerial torpedoes or flying bombs. And there's a difference, and I'm going to concentrate on drones and not on aerial torpedoes. And the difference is that drones are usually designed, particularly the ones today, to have multiple missions. They're not just to be destroyed. Whereas the cruise missile and the V-1 program that I'll mention of the Germans was designed just to have bombs flying and to explode at the enemy. Now, the other major contribution that made drones possible was Lawrence Sperry's wings level autopilot. This was in 1914, which is not that long after the Wright brothers invented the aircraft. And I got some stuff here. I use the internet generously here. And these were bi-winged aircraft, and Sperry was, again, another sort of a showman. And he invented this thing which detected the roll of the aircraft wings and then was able to provide a control that would restore it. So it's a wings level autopilot, which means that the aircraft could fly, and if it started to roll, the problem is if you just let an aircraft go off and take off, it'll just roll over and crash. And so the wings level autopilot enables you to have the aircraft take off, and the autopilot would keep the wings level, so you could just have it going on, and that's how it became a drone. And the thing that he did was rather exciting, that people tell the story of. This is an artist's rendition here, but he was at what became the Paris Air Show in 1914, and he would fly the aircraft down about 20 feet over the runway, and then he had his assistant get up and walk out. You can see him here. Walk out on the biplane, and then when he came by the reviewing stand, he would take his hands off the yoke and show people that he wasn't doing anything. Then he went around and came around again, and this time he got up and walked to the other edge of the airplane, so nobody was in the cockpit, and people were quite impressed. You can see it's a pretty dilapidated looking aircraft, but it's what made, if you didn't have a wings level autopilot, you could not have a drone. In World War II, the emphasis was still on these flying bombs, and the V-1 is an example. So I'm really not covering flying bombs, so I'm not going to talk about that. But in World War II, aircraft became a significant part of the war effort. A lot of aircraft were being flown, bombers, and so people had never tried to shoot down an aircraft before. The anti-artillery gunners on the ground didn't really know how to shoot an aircraft. Pilots or flying aircraft around didn't really know how to shoot a moving target. So they had to have practice, and this is where the drones came in. There was apparently 15,000 of these drones built between 1939 and the end of the war, just purely for practice. Go up and see if you can figure out how much in front of the aircraft you have to shoot to make a hit. These are some of the drones that were used. The one that was apparently the bread and butter drone was this guy here. He doesn't look very exciting, but he wasn't supposed to be exciting. He just flew at constant speed with everybody trying to hit him. And if they didn't, they would take him and send him up again, and everybody would try to hit him. So in the 1950s, drones were considered as having decoys. You would take up some of these drones, you would drop them down, and hopefully the enemy pilot would be confused about who he was trying to shoot at. It didn't really work very well. In 1960, Gary Powers was shot down while flying a U-2 over the Soviet Union, and this created a lot of terrible press for the United States. They weren't supposed to be spying. We weren't very friendly with the Russians, but we weren't supposed to be spying on them. But yet they had a prisoner of war, and they kept Gary Powers for a number of years and kept telling everybody what bad country the U.S. was because they had these people spying on them. So Eisenhower decided that we were not going to send up a human to do this again. We were going to develop these drones, and this is what sort of spurred the development, and they were widely used to fly over Cold War territory, at that point being North Korea and the Soviet Union. In the Vietnam War, drones became the robotic eyes in the sky. I liked that quote. So the drones were used to try as reconnaissance, not as a weapon, but they would send up the drones. The drones would try to find out where the enemy was, report it down, and people would plan the mission according to where the enemy was. Apparently there's an aircraft called a Lightning Bug, which I've got a little picture of, and it flew over 34,000 surveillance missions during the Vietnam era. There's another technology which had to happen before drones really became serious in the reconnaissance era, And that's the satellite technology. When they first had drones, you essentially had to have the drone within line of sight. So it didn't give you much distance. You know, you had to be within a mile, or else you couldn't receive the transmission, the data, the camera image, the video from the drone. You couldn't receive it unless it was in sight. But the satellite technology allowed, and the satellite communication of digital data allowed you to control drones and receive tremendous amount of data from drones thousands and thousands of miles away. In fact, today, the Predator, which you've kind of been reading about in the newspapers, are really flown by humans in a trailer in Nevada. And they're controlling the drone that's over in Iraq or Pakistan. And so this is part of the problem that you'll see in the movie tonight, some of the ethical issues involved here. This is this lightning bug, which apparently flew 34,000 missions over Vietnam as a reconnaissance, no weapons, just cameras. This is actually a drone that I had some experience with. Part of my research is in the drone area. This is a UAV, and again, UAVs are what we call them. Drones were used during World War II for targets, and then the media got a hold of it. So everything now, which is unmanned, people call drones, but the media calls them drones. Nobody else does. They're called unmanned air vehicles to the military. They're called people doing research on them. They're unmanned air vehicles. The Scan Eagle is rather interesting. It's about 6 feet long, about 6 feet wide. It can be launched from a catapult, which can be on a boat or truck. And it also doesn't need a runway to land. This is a cable here. The drone flies into this cable, and it has hooks at the end of the wings. And so all you got to do is hit it, and it's pretty easy to do. And then when it gets into the hook, it spins around. All of its translational energy is transformed into rotational energy, and it comes down nice and easy. So this is now the workhorse of reconnaissance, again, reconnaissance vehicles, not weapons, in Vietnam today. The Marines, when they want to find out who's over the hill, will send up a Scan Eagle and find out what's on the other side. This I just got off the web. This is an Australian group. These are the size of a lot of the reconnaissance UAVs. This is about the same size as the Boeing Scan Eagle. And again, they can launch it a number of ways. Some of these you can even launch just by throwing them, and they can launch themselves. ISR is a term the military uses, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And that's where drones were used way up until the late 1980s. That's all they were used for, is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And some of the ones are convoy protection. You can have drones flying over the convoy to see if there's any bad stuff going on the side of them. I got involved consulting with the Coast Guard on a search and rescue. The Coast Guard goes out and looks for boats that turn over and for people that have fallen into the ocean. They'd like to try to rescue them, and they have a pilot who's got to take care of the helicopter, and they have a human who's looking down trying to see if there's anybody in the ocean. And what they're considering doing is getting some drones to follow, just to track the helicopter, essentially be their wingmen. But they have infrared cameras, they have regular digital cameras that can take a video and give that video to the people inside the helicopter to help find the people. Perimeter surveillance and border patrol, they're currently using these drones on the border to try to keep track. I know there's some ethical issues here to be discussed, but that's the way they're being used. These are some of my UAVs. They don't look very pretty, but they don't have any weapons. We've done research on these to try to figure out how they can cooperate with each other. The reason I showed this was just to say that when you're building a drone, you're not building it for a human. So you don't have to provide a nice windshield for them to look through. You don't have to provide humans have a limited tolerance to being accelerated and de-accelerated. So the whole design of the thing is entirely different. You'll notice that the propeller in this is in the back as opposed to the front. And the reason that is, this is a gimbaled camera right here. And so the camera is controlled by this trailer, which is in Nevada. With us, we were in Berkeley, but they can move this around and take a look at what they're looking at. And so the whole design of drones, they look very different than commercial aircraft that have to carry humans or fighter aircraft that have to carry humans. The design parameters are entirely different. A little bit of history I'll try to go through fast. I was sort of surprised. It was interesting doing this. In about the 1980s, the Pentagon and Congress began to lose interest in drones. There just wasn't a lot of need for them. Human pilots were a lot better. What are we doing? And the CIA took over at that time. They had a huge interest in drones. They don't have soldiers. They don't have, they needed to have, first of all, surveillance to try to see what was going on in some countries like Pakistan, Iraq, and the events in Serbia and the Middle East. So in the 1980s, the development of drones, and I'll use the word drone just because the press does, the CIA took over, and they really developed that from up until about the late 1990s. The CIA was the principal supporter. So under the CIA, drones became not only eyes in the sky, but also weapons in the sky. They were responsible for developing the Predator. It was first flown in 1994 and added the Hellfire Missiles, which is the laser-guided missiles which allow the bombs to fly the laser in. They're very accurate and very deadly. 9/11 really made a huge change. Up until that point, George Bush was very reluctant to use the Predator. It was kind of a dicey issue. Pakistan didn't want it. A lot of the people didn't think it was appropriate. 9/11 changed that, and after 9/11, the drone use of the Predator expanded very, very rapidly. The first CIA mission that used the drones in 2002 was a disaster, and it almost caused the ending of the program. They thought they had found bin Laden. It turned out to be civilians, and there were a number of civilians killed, and this has happened a number of times. This program is a very controversial program. Again, this will be brought up in the movie that you're about to see, and will create a lot of discussions about whether drones are things that should be used or not. We can see they don't look very nice. This is an early version of the Predator, which I'm sure you've heard about in the newspapers. The one that you've probably seen more often is this one. You can see the propellers at the back, and the reason, again, you do that is so that the camera mounted up here doesn't have to look through rotating blades. It can essentially see. These are these Hellfire missiles, and again, up until the 90s, they didn't have missiles. They were reconnaissance, and then when they got into the 90s, they started to put missiles on them. This is what's followed on to the Predator is called the Reaper, made by the same company. Pretty scary looking device here with more armament. This is really scary, I think. I hope this is an artist's rendition, but this is sort of the Predator gone berserk. So I did want to talk about ethical issues, because that's what the movie's about, it seems to me. The CIA's, not all of these are covered in the movie, but the CIA's use of a target list of terrorists that they pass by the White House okays it, and then these people are fair game to be killed. Killing by remotely located humans disturbs a lot of people because the human is not endangered. I know I had some people, when they saw the American sniper, had a similar reaction. That here's somebody who's, again, saving troops and so forth, but he's not personally in danger, usually, and yet he's killing people that are in danger. And this somehow creates problems. It should create problems that people should talk about. This is an issue, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which all of the people that are in Iraq have problems with, that are involved in combat. But drone crews have a particular problem with this, and they're trying to figure out what to do with this problem. The problem is that the drone crews are in Nevada, and they're flying these weapons, and they may be killing people from 9 to 5, and then they go home and teach their children soccer. And this disconnect of I'm at war, and now I'm at home, and now I'm at war, and now I'm at home has created a lot of the drone crews to have severe mental problems. And they're saying that people that are in the military situation in Iraq, for example, at least they're with people, comrades they can share, they can help each other. You feel you're saving their lives as well as your own life. But when you're in Nevada, you're not saving your mate's life, and you're not saving your own life. Anyway, this is a problem that people are wrestling with. The whole problem of killing by robots, that's an issue that people should talk about. I have a colleague at Georgia Tech who's written a book on the morality of robots, and actually he has the point of view that robots can be much more humane than humans. You can program in the Geneva Convention into a robot. You can tell a robot when to kill and when not to kill. The problem with humans is that they know, but the day before their brother was killed, or the day before their colleague was killed, and they're not rational. They carry a lot of emotional baggage and do things that they later regret. And this apparently, with Cordy, I'm not sure I agree totally. I'm not sure I'd want to face a robot with a machine gun. But anyway, again, an issue that one should consider. Now I'd like to move on.
Bradley Manning showed us killing while the operators were laughing.
All right. Let me move on to happier topics. Commercial drone applications. We are now about to enter the era of commercial drones. Package delivery, police surveillance, news coverage, movie industry, hurricane detection and prediction, fire detection and prediction, crop dusting, pipeline surveillance, and border protection. All of these things can have good parts and bad parts, but people are waiting on this technology to happen. I have a few shots off the web here. This looks like a toy. In fact, it would be a toy that you could buy for 40, 50 bucks if it was about this big. You can also buy these toys for 5,000 or 6,000 bucks that can carry rather significant packages. These are some of the ones that are out there today. This is a package maybe that Amazon will have. In fact, I have a prediction of Amazon, what these are going to look like. I actually have a development program at Amazon that are ready to fly this very shortly, if given permission by the Federal Aviation Administration. I just included this as something that's a little bit on the research front. They are now making unmanned air vehicles that can fit on your finger. They call them micro UAVs and nano UAVs. There's a movie by, not a movie, a book by Michael Crichton that maybe some of you have read called Swarm, which is sort of nano robotics, nano UAVs gone bad, and taking over the world, learning how to reproduce themselves, and learning how to use solar energy for their energy. Yeah, you know, a lot of that could happen. Could happen. The use of drones in civilian airspace. So this is what FAA came out actually with 2 weeks ago. The FAA finally came out with some on small UAVs. So I sort of summarized, I think, the big things. There's a lot of recommendations. But the UAV is defined as one less than 55 pounds, which would include the Amazon type of vehicles. They can only be operated in visual line of sight, so you have to be able to see it. Only in daylight. You can't use it at night. It has to have it cannot have a speed greater than 100 miles per hour. It cannot have an altitude greater than 500 feet. So we're sort of talking about the hobbyist range. 500 feet is not very high. And UAVs, this is what really annoys Amazon. UAVs may not operate over any persons not directly involved in the operation. So you can't fly over houses. You can't fly over cars. You really have to fly in a remote area where there are no people except your people that are taking data, whatever they may be doing. So this is the bone of contention with the industry that wants to use these for package delivery that they'll try to work on. There are many ethical issues for civilian UAVs, just as there are for military UAVs. Privacy is probably on the top of everybody's list. I don't want big government looking at me. Police use, a lot of people are terribly opposed to having the police have drones to be able to use, even forceful drones talking about. And even just noise, something as simple as noise. If you had a helicopter flying down at 10 feet, that would be enough noise to crash your windows. Of course, these are smaller. But anyway, these are the sort of debates that people are having with the ethical use for civilian UAVs, with privacy being on the top. So some of the future issues which are kind of interesting are that the larger drones haven't been touched yet, like the Predator. Should they be allowed to fly in and land at Kennedy Airport or San Francisco Airport? What type of technology do they have to be? They're currently thinking they should have sense and avoid. That means that an unmanned air vehicle, if it's going to go in civilian airspace, has to be able to detect other air vehicles and has to be able to avoid them. So they have to be able to look around, have three-dimensional view, and be able to take evasive action. We're not there yet in the drone area. Autonomous drones is really what I do. I don't do these drones that I've been showing here. Autonomy means that today the regulation is that a human has to have control. One human has to have control of each drone. You can't have multiple drones. And autonomy means that the drones have the ability, the human is still in charge, but he's no longer flying the UAV, the drone. He's just sort of requesting information. So you may have a fleet of 9 or 10 unmanned air vehicles. You may want to go over and have a picture of San Jose and then go over in Stanford and see what they're up to, probably no good. So the autonomous drones are coming, and Amazon's going to have that because they can't stay within line of sight. If you're going to deliver a package, it's going to have to go out of line of sight. So when it's out of line of sight, then it has to be able to negotiate and be able to come back to base if things happen that are bad. Swarms of drones are things that they're going to happen in the future. They're trying to make drones that can imitate birds and fish. Intercept drones. A lot of you maybe have been reading the last 2 weeks, and we had this hobbyist drone that landed on the White House lawn. It's got a lot of people sort of disturbed a little bit. The French got really disturbed. Apparently some drones were over there, and these were not, the one that landed on the White House lawn was a mistake. The guy was flying his drone around and it just came down. But in France, they had drones that were going into government buildings, by government buildings, and they really got spooked. So what they want to do, they're starting a large program of intercept drones. So that means that you have to be able to have, like on the White House, that you have these friendly drones that are flying around. And if any enemy drones come in, the friendly drones destroy the enemy. It's really sounding like a science fiction movie, which is what you get to see tonight. The problem with the intercept drones apparently is that you can detect these drones, and maybe they're this big. You can detect, radar can do that, but the problem is you can't distinguish them from birds. So you don't know whether it's a bird or a drone. You don't know whether it's carrying a camera or a bomb. So this intercept drone technology is... So remotely controlled, in summary, remotely controlled drones, remotely controlled anything, presents technical and ethical issues. So the human is not there, the human's someplace else, and all of a sudden things change. Drone technology is rapidly expanding into civilian life now that civilian applications have become feasible. Robotic technology in general is on the verge of presenting many new technical, ethical, and social dilemmas. Are they replacing human jobs? Are they creating human jobs? What are they doing? Now here's my last thing, and we'll see if we can make it work. Are we going to go?
Yeah.
Should I do it?
Here's some audio. Don't click on that.
The audio is not terribly interesting. What you're going to see is a Domino's pizza delivery, if I can make it work.
Let's see.
Yeah, that's it. Should I just click on it?
Domino's Pizza teamed up with a
Oh, there you go. You had it, didn't you?
creative ad agency titled Tea and Biscuits to test out a prototype for a flying drone that can deliver
cheese pies. Described as an octocopter, the device carried 2 large pepperoni pizzas and conducted a flight over a city near London. The pizzas, both contained in an insulated bag, were secured to the drone. They were delivered in perfect condition, and it only took about 10 minutes to venture 4 miles. The founder of Tea and Biscuits stated, "If anything, it went quicker than a pizza boy. We were amazed at how easy it was going to be." The drone is being called the Domicopter. Although the device won't take the place of human delivery drivers anytime soon, Domino's is reportedly experimenting with the drone at their UK headquarters. Federal Aviation Administration authorities estimate that private drones will make up a $90 billion industry within 10 years.
So that's the end. Thank you very much. question. I'll do my best.
Well, I'm concerned about your use of language.
My use of language?
Yeah.
I am an engineer myself.
The way you said, these are coming, and these will present problems in the future, and this dominant order, Amazon needs these, which seems to indicate that you are saying that this is a foregone conclusion, and there should be no debate with any possibility of stopping technology from taking hold. It's simply because it's possible. And I think that we should really change our use of language so that we can change the way we think, so that we give ourselves the option to say, maybe we don't want this. Maybe we don't want birds to be destroyed by interceptor drones or have packages of books or pizzas dropped on our heads, or whatever it is, not to mention the more kind of sinister imagination that can happen. But should we even entertain the possibility that these are not?
I didn't say they are coming. I said that the Amazon and the companies like Domino's want them to come. I don't have a sign. I have no stock. If I said it, I apologize for saying it. I thought I said the FAA regulations were proposed. They're not regulations. They don't even allow Domino's and Amazon to operate. So the current regulations do not allow that to happen. And it's now a period of time where if you really want to express your opinion, express it to the Federal Aviation Administration. There's a 6-month period where you can do that.
But you are someone who is an engineer, who is, you seem to have the capacity to argue for the reality of this, and the way you were using language just then, I'm sorry to contradict you, but as someone else heard you say, you did say these are coming and they need these.
Even if he did, he's going to inherently have his own propensities. This is his work, so you need to cut him a little slack. Like this is his work, and I say that understanding that there are the two sides, but you can't. You said this. You said that's not like I don't know what you're trying to get at.
Yes.
Do you think in a realistic context, or rather, how realistic do you think it would be for drones to work in a utility sense? Maybe, for example, given San Francisco, like as far as airspace, and I mean, if people really were to go through with using them as a delivery option, I mean, it's a real conversation.
It sure is.
Like, I've been a truck driver, and I know that like sometimes it can seem futile to haul 10,000 pounds worth of truck across town to deliver something that's 5 pounds.
I don't think the technology is there now where you could do it in San Francisco. There's just too much foggy days, and it's just too much out there that you couldn't really guarantee the safety. So I really think FAA did the right thing by saying that if you're going to operate them, you have to operate them not over houses, not over cars, not over people, and then view the technologies. The sensors that are being developed now, the radars, and lidars, and cameras, are all getting better and better. And I think at some point, the technology may be there so you can do this sort of thing. I think a lot of people think that the technology will develop. Whether or not it's allowed, it's already allowed in many countries.
Well, like your professional opinion as an engineer, how far away do you think the technology is for those things to be able to like operate and articulate their positioning well enough?
It's a good question. My other major field of research is autonomous cars. So I've given some talks about the Google car, and it's the same issue that comes up. When do you think the technology will be there so that you can turn control, you can take the steering wheel off the car and just let the car take over? It's not there now. The human's going to be involved for quite some time. If I had to pick a number, which I shouldn't, I would say 5 to 10 years before the technology is sufficient for Amazon-type deliveries.
Well, that's involving production, yeah.
What's that?
That's involving production. Like, I mean, you could engineer it that it would work, but I mean.
Yeah, they have to develop the sensors. They have to develop the failure mode so that if something loses power, it doesn't land on your head or my head. They have to have a way to guarantee that this thing, when it fails, will fail safe. And they're not there right now.
So,
Yes?
And you had mentioned earlier that in regards to future issues, we're not there yet. What do you see as the most significant impact of drones over the next 5 or 10 years, if that's possible?
It's going to be in the civilian arena. I mean, I think that in the military, they're developed and they're ethical issues and so forth with the technology developed. The civilian area, I think you're going to see them used in some pretty important applications like fire detection, hurricane detection, and prediction. What they're doing with the hurricanes now is, and the fires in particular, they have very sophisticated computer models that need inputs from the drones to tell them where the fire is now, and they then can predict exactly where it's going to go. And I think you're going to see pipeline detection. You're going to see a lot of applications where they're not flying over people's heads. When the technology matures, I throw a number like 5 or 10 years, when they can actually guarantee to the FAA and to people like you that it's safe to have one of these things above your head, then it'll be used.
Do you see them as a big privacy issue in the future?
I do see a big privacy issue. I do think it's a huge issue. The drones are going to be capable, these little quad rotors that I showed you are capable of stationary flight, and they can be looking in your window. I think it's an enormous issue. So, yes.
Do you know if any international organization is looking into our use of drones in Pakistan, given that we've killed at least 800 civilians, we don't keep any records, we don't pay reparation, and we don't pick up the body parts afterwards?
No. Yes.
I think the ethical question might have been understated, and that is that with drones, there is zero personal risk or, in a certain sense, accountability. Even if you're delivering a Domino's pizza in a truck, you've got to drive reasonably safely or you might hurt yourself. Whereas a drone crashing or a drone killing people, especially at a distance, essentially means absolutely zero danger or risk to the person who's doing it. And that seems to me why the Bradley Manning scene was so chilling when they killed unarmed Reuters people, I believe, press people, and we're just laughing about it as though it was a video game from their safe, faraway, controlled location. And I think that aspect is radically different from flying your own airplane or driving a truck.
I agree with you. I'm sorry I didn't say more about that. I tried to mention the remotely piloted anything where the person is not there, but he's someplace else comfortable, is a serious issue. I'm not saying it's evil, but it's a serious issue. Yep.
One more question.
One more question.
well, in your professional opinion, what's the reality of them descaling their involvement with drones at this point?
Who's they?
The military.
You know, I don't do much military things, so I'm not really a good person to say. I doubt it. I doubt if they do descale it. It's the only thing the only weapon they have that can go into Pakistan and other places. So I doubt it unless the president comes out and disallows it. But right now I don't see that it being scaled down. I think there's a public outcry in a lot of countries, including the United States. If the pressure gets big enough, it could happen. So.